Hey Lindsay, how's it going?
Hey Jeremy, it's great to be back with you tonight in our final episode before Election Day.
I've really enjoyed our time together on the Divide Guide. Learned a lot so far, but one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last week, especially after living through 2016, is I've noticed that the president has some crazy, incredible stamina. He has been traveling to so many states in the last 48 hours. I'm curious, what does it say about his campaign? Is he fired up? Is he excited to be out there? Are the voters responding to this? What does his travel schedule say about the campaign strategy in these final days?
Absolutely. Jeremy, I think it says that the president is out working to gain votes. If you talk to those who are closely involved in tracking the election, they would tell you that you're starting to see enthusiasm on the ground that you didn't see in 2016. You look at Florida, while cautiously optimistic, they believe that if they're able to harness the momentum they're seeing today through Election Day, that Republicans could pull off a win. Again, everyone is very cautiously optimistic, but the president's schedule shows you how important it is to him and the Republican ticket to get out and gain these votes. The president has been in 11 states since we last met. He'll be in many more before this is published and before Election Day. Today alone, he's been in 12 states, in a contrast to the Democrats who have had 7 stops, one being Joe Biden voting. There is a clear contrast between the two campaigns. If you were to ask Republicans, they would say that the Democrats are campaigning as if they have this in the bag. And they should have learned from 2016 that nothing is guaranteed. And so I have to say, while there are a lot smarter individuals on the trail on both sides, you're wondering, why aren't the Democrats out there trying to speak to these people? And even if they're trying to campaign as if a pandemic is happening, as you say, time and time again, why aren't they doing virtual events? It's not a matter of how many states you're in. It's a sheer matter of how many events you're having. In particular, when you look at Joe Biden's schedule, you have Senator Harris, who is out on the trail, but you don't have the top of the ticket, the guy with the name on the ballot. He's not out there campaigning rigorously like you have the president. And the president, this is his strong suit, his ability to go out and speak to voters. In these rally settings, the president thrives in these conditions, and we're only going to see that continue through Election Day.
It's insane, right? Because there would not be a single Democrat alive who lived through 2016 who would say that they're going to take anything for granted. And I definitely think the Biden team is in the same camp. They're not taking a poll for granted, a single voter for granted. They're not taking Pennsylvania for granted. They are doing all they can to make sure in these last few days they get out the vote. One of the things I think is here, and I think, Lindsay, you mentioned this because I mentioned this every single week, is the Biden campaign is campaigning as if there is a pandemic going on. They're having drive-through rallies where people get in their cars and they come and listen to the speaker speak and they honk their horns when they agree with something. Biden's had a lot of virtual events, but he's also been spreading his surrogates across the nation where there are key states and key voters to be had. As you said, Kamala Harris has been on the campaign trail in Florida, for example, and she'll be in Texas another day. They've unleashed the juggernaut, Barack Obama, who is out there talking to voters, and he and the vice president are going to show up in Michigan on Halloween to drive some more of that messaging home. I will say this, you're right. The campaigns have a lot smarter people than us working on them who are looking at polls and data, and they're looking at all the stats and making sure candidates are in strategic locations. But I will say, I think the Biden campaign right now, what we're hearing there is they're trying to make sure they're making those one-on-one contact with voters to make sure that anyone who is in doubt that Biden should be the next commander-in-chief does no longer have any of those doubts. They're going to get them to go out and vote at the end of the day. And I think what we're going to see on Election Day and the weeks that follow is that Biden was successful in that measure. What are you hearing from your friends who are talking about the messaging that Trump is unleashing every time he makes a stop in one of the 50 states?
They are pleased to see the president stay on message. His ability this week to be very targeted, to talk about the economy, to paint a clear contrast between himself and a Biden administration. And you're seeing this throughout the campaign with various surrogates. You're watching them in these different states such as Florida, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and tailoring that message to what matters most to those voters. Who are you speaking to, and what do they need to hear to turn them out on Election Day? That's a big focus for Republicans right now. that ability to harness this momentum that we're seeing today through Election Day and bring voters to the polls. We know that Republicans historically show up on Election Day. Election Day is when Republicans cast their ballot. Can the party turn out these voters on Election Day to bring it home for the president?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, despite the differences between the policies between the two candidates, they do have this in common, right? They definitely both understand the need to get voters out. They also understand the need to tailor their messaging to those voters, something I think our clients can learn a lot from, right? Where, when you're in different places, you need to make sure you're speaking to the values of people who are there to meet them where they are with that core messaging. Biden is definitely focused on the pandemic, COVID-19. He's going to say the president has failed to lead in one of America's darkest moments. He's going to say that the president knew what was happening ahead of time and did not tell you the truth. He's going to talk about healthcare and talk about the fact that Justice Coney Barrett, who was sworn to the court earlier this week, is poised to strike down the Affordable Care Act and say that if you have a health insurance plan and a pre-existing condition and a middle-class voter or a voter who is struggling just to get by, that the healthcare is one of those expenses you cannot avoid. And I think Democrats will let that message work in 2016. I think Biden's going to try to drive that message home again here, while also talking about the issues that matter to voters the most. When we look at spending in these elections, I think Democrats are also smartly, just like the president is, driving home some of those swing states as well when it comes to Colorado, Maine, Arizona, where Scott Kelly is running for Senate. I think Democrats are trying to encourage people to come out so we can flip some of those states to hopefully get gains on election night. I've been trying to figure out, with the last 72 hours, is there anything that the president's team might be worried about happening in those last 3 days of campaigning, something that they would like to avoid?
You'd like to avoid an incident where the president goes off message, where he is no longer hitting his stride and speaking to what he has done over the last 4 years and what he is going to do if he is reelected over the next 4 years. The campaign needs to see the president stick to that messaging and help get voters out on Election Day. We talked about this a week ago, that ability to give air cover to soft Republicans who are on the fence. We need them to show up and vote Republican on Election Day. And how do we do that? And that's done through discipline and messaging, through a continuation of what we saw from the last debate and we've seen over the last several days, and hopefully we'll continue to see into election. I think anyone can say the president has had a series of good days. His campaign trail, his rallies, his events, they've all been good for him and for the ticket. And can we continue that through in these 72 hours? And Republicans are really going to be focused on getting out the vote, turning out voters on Election Day to bring it home for the President Donald Trump.
I think Democrats are in the same boat. It's crazy the similarities in those last 3 days of an election. Joe Biden during the debate, spoke off the cuff about big oil and how he wants to regulate that. An issue that if you know any Democrats, is probably an issue that they all agree on. But what was remarkable is that the Trump campaign took that issue and they've used it as a key talking point in their rallies to try to rally up voters and say, Joe Biden's going to regulate oil and you're going to lose your job. And that's been a very effective messaging point. So I would say for the Democrats, they want Biden to be simple Joe Biden on message. He's going to be president. Just trust us on this one. I will say during my time on the Obama campaign, those last 72 hours are so hectic. They're fierce, they're fast, but we are focused on voter turnout at the end of the day, trying to figure out where people live, if they voted, if you need to ride to the polls, how you connect them there, to make sure that anyone who is on the fence, who might not like President Trump, who's not sure about Biden because Bernie was their candidate, can look at Joe Biden and say, you know what, he's the guy I'm going to vote for. Okay, I'll get to the polls before 7 o'clock at night. Yeah. If Biden can stay on message, I do believe the Democrats might see something really great happen the week of November 4th or the following weeks in the sign of him being the president-elect of the United States.
Yes, we both know this comes down to enthusiasm. And are each of the candidates able to harness and carry that enthusiasm in these battleground states through to Election Day? All eyes will be on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, Ohio, seeing how those votes come in on Tuesday. Some we will know sooner than others, but can that enthusiasm carry through to bring out voters and bring it home for the candidate in the end?
For sure, yeah. Well, Lindsay, we will see what happens. I've had a great time having this discussion with you. Let's regroup after Election Day and see what happens. But in the meantime, Lindsay, this has been a lot of fun. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Have a good night.